Now tomorrow on May the 16th, it will have been 20 years since the release of Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, which feels impossible for me to believe considering I can still clearly remember sitting in the theater having just watched The Phantom Menace for the first time and thinking to myself as the credits began to roll, great, we have to wait another 3 long years for the next film in the trilogy. And yet, somehow, here we are with that movie that once felt so far off, now being 20 years in the rear view mirror. And for this 20th anniversary, I, no surprise, wanted to once again talk about the film a little bit, but instead of maybe pointing out some of its flaws or discussing how maybe things could have potentially been better in the film, which I have done before, I instead want to talk about something that the film did that was actually quite brilliant and, dare I say, groundbreaking, especially at the time. Something that I'm surprised more film franchises haven't really tried to replicate, especially now in the day and age of franchises where every studio out there wants to turn their properties into a highly connected universe, thanks in large part to the success of the MCU. Though, fittingly enough, I guess the one franchise that does kind of do this, what I'm talking about, is indeed the MCU. But anyway, what that something is storytelling or world building in a way that allows you to springboard directly into other connected stories across multiple mediums. Stories that finally, in the case of Episode 2 and Star Wars, truly allowed the wars to be put into Star Wars. Because when you really stop and think about it, and despite its name, the original Star Wars trilogy wasn't so much about war. The Galactic Civil War was mainly just a sort of backdrop for the personal stories of these wonderful characters. I mean, we learned virtually no details about the war itself. We're literally thrown right into the middle of the conflict and don't know why it's being fought exactly. Beyond that, there's a rebellion fighting back against an evil empire. We certainly know the good guys from the bad guys. And yes, obviously the prequels do eventually give us plenty of explanation. They give us backstory for the war, or the cause or reason behind the war, and how the galaxy will be conquered by Palpatine, and why there is an evil empire instead of a republic. We learned how Palpatine uses another war, the Clone Wars, to take over the galaxy, which is ultimately the cause for the next war as well, the Galactic Civil War that we see in the original trilogy. Yet even though the prequels give us that story or backstory, even though they tell us or show us how the Clone Wars came to be and how they'll lead to the conquering of the galaxy by Palpatine, they do a seemingly very odd thing with the war itself. They kind of skip over a good portion, if not most, of the war. Attack of the Clones ends with the Clone Wars beginning, and Revenge of the Sith begins with them basically ending. And sure, we see some big battles in those films, no doubt about it. There are plenty of epic scale battles throughout all of Star Wars, and certainly they're in the prequels and take place during the Clone Wars, which I think really helps sell the scope and scale of the Clone Wars, despite how little of it we actually see in comparison to how large or expansive it actually was. We may not exactly get to see it as a galaxy-sweeping event in the films, but I think we get the impression regardless. Which then means, or could be argued, it was smart to not waste time, if you will, showing the war or more battles when we already understood how massive the conflict is or was, especially considering, just like the original trilogy before it, the prequels were supposed to be about the characters and their personal stories more so than the conflict going on around them. Though, without question, I would say the war in the prequels is much more sort of front and center, and we do get a better understanding, though not a perfect one, of the conflict when compared to the original trilogy. I will forever maintain that, love or hate the prequels, you have to admit they did so much for the lore of Star Wars, and the world building within them is almost unparalleled, even if the story or films themselves aren't always exceptionally executed. However, all that said, there was still plenty of room for stories set during the war, during the Clone Wars, which is mostly skipped over in the films. And George Lucas clearly and wisely realized that with the creation of the Clone Wars multimedia project, which was a series of books and comics as well as a series of animated shorts that was not only set in between episodes 2 and 3 in-universe, but also set between them outside of it. Meaning we got all this while waiting for the next film, and so this time, or when the credits rolled on episode 2, I wouldn't have to wait 3 long years, to get the next part of the story. I'd actually have quite a bit to chew on to hold me over until the next film. And it wasn't just random or dull, irrelevant stories either. It was about the actual Clone Wars and did, in various ways, have significant relevance to the films, with the second season of the Tartakovsky Clone Wars series actually leading right up to the very start of Revenge of the Sith. which I found absolutely incredible, damn near mind-blowing at the time. It was amazing that I got to watch events that led right up to the start of the next movie before the movie actually came out. Even though, yeah, that series has since been retconned, but let's not get into that. But even still, even with that impressive level of connectivity, even with a story that led directly into the start of the film, nothing from the Clone Wars multimedia project was what you would call required viewing or reading. You wouldn't in any way be lost while watching Revenge of the Sith if you hadn't partook in any or all of it. The film still stood completely on its own. You just happen to have a, shall we say, fuller or more enhanced viewing experience had you kept up with everything from the project. Which is or was the key, and is always the key with tie-in material, making it relevant and rewarding, but not required, while also making it good in and of itself, of course. This is the problem that, say, the tie-in material around the sequel trilogy had. None of it felt all that connected or relevant when watching the films. There didn't seem to be any sort of game plan with it like there was with the Clone Wars multimedia project, where there was a clear and, again, impressive cohesion between the two. Nor did the sequels intentionally leave a type of gap in the story with the potential for a great many stories to be told later on or in conjunction with the films as they were coming out, or to purposely set something up for later on. And yes, there is a 1-year gap between episodes 8 and 9, but I'm not sure how much actual room there is for an interesting story there. Not that all fans even want something set between episodes 8 and 9 anyway, but even still, it's surprising they didn't plan something around those films. And I mean plan from the very start, before even episode 7. Though I guess when there isn't even a plan for the trilogy itself, we shouldn't be too surprised there wasn't a plan for anything around them. Though it should be surprising, if not mind-blowing, when you consider the massive success of the Clone Wars. Now, speaking about the 2008 animated series that ran on Cartoon Network and finished up on Disney Plus with season 7 a couple years back. Which, as much as I enjoyed the initial Clone Wars multimedia project, just might have been one of the greatest successes in the history of Star Wars, when you consider that it not only appealed to fans of the prequels, but created a whole new generation of fans that found it when they were young and grew up with it, and that it also, for some older fans, helped salvage the prequels for them to some degree. It also, as said before, really and finally put the war in Star Wars, that what could amount to a throwaway line in the first Star Wars film about how Obi-Wan had fought with Luke's father in the Clone Wars, that he was a general in them, had now come to life and was finally giving Star Wars a truly war-centric story on screen. Because certainly there have been, or has been, more war-centric stories, you could say, in the books and comics of the expanded universe before this. And so, for better or worse, the legacy of Attack of the Clones, the brilliance of it, you could say, could be what it led to, that it ended up giving us the Clone Wars, showing how much success there could be in creating something that tied directly into a film, that there could be interconnectivity on the small screen with the big screen, that there was a way to finally and truly put the wars in Star Wars. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about any or all of this. Is one of the best parts of Attack of the Clones, or the prequels in general, that they gave us the Clone Wars, that it showed just how successful tying stories together like this can be? Whatever you think, leave your comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.